What if the worst patch of dirt in your yard could actually grow fruit? I'm talking about that dry, cracked, rocky spot where even weeds seem to struggle. The place most people look at and think, yeah, nothing's growing there. But here's the weird part. Some fruit plants don't just survive in soil like that. They actually handle it better than the crops most of us spend all season babying. I found 20 fruits that can handle poor soil surprisingly well. Some of them taste amazing. Some are barely talked about. One of them can even help improve the soil around it over time. And a few of these actually do worse when you pamper them too much. Number 1, blackberry. Let's start with one you probably already know, blackberry. What a lot of people don't realize is just how tough blackberries really are. They don't just survive in bad soil, they take over. Clay, gravel, sand, compacted dirt by a fence line, the rough strip next to a driveway. Blackberries usually don't care much. If you've ever seen wild blackberries growing somewhere nobody planted them, that's exactly the point. They're one of those plants that seem perfectly happy making a life out of neglected ground. Honestly, with blackberries, you're not so much growing them as trying to keep up with them. Number 2, elderberry. Elderberry is another one that feels almost unfair. People pay serious money for elderberry syrup, but the plant itself often grows in rough, low-value places, ditches, edges, wet clay, bottomland, places that don't look promising at all. And yet elderberry can grow fast, get big, and produce heavily in ground that looks like it shouldn't support much of anything. The berries have been used for syrup, wine, and traditional remedies for a very long time. And as a plant, elderberry is a lot less delicate than the way it's marketed. Number 3, mulberry. Mulberry might be the perfect example of this whole video. I mentioned that tree growing in what looks like a gravel pit, and I really wasn't exaggerating. Mulberries are incredibly adaptable. Compacted soil, dry spells, urban neglect, less than perfect conditions. They can handle a lot. And once a mulberry tree gets established, it can produce a ridiculous amount of fruit. So much that sidewalks and driveways can end up stained purple underneath it. The fruit tastes a little like blackberry crossed with raspberry, but softer, sweeter, and more delicate. And in a lot of cases, when a mulberry isn't getting pampered, it puts more energy into fruit instead of just pushing leafy growth. That's a pattern you'll see with a few of these. Number 4, American persimmon. Now we're getting into plants with a little personality. American persimmon grows wild and dry, rocky, sometimes pretty unimpressive ground across a huge part of the eastern and central U.S. You may have walked past one before and never noticed, but when the fruit is fully ripe, it's incredible. Rich, soft, sweet, almost like apricot, date, and caramel all met in one fruit. If it isn't ripe, though, it is a completely different experience. Unripe persimmon is intensely astringent. It dries your whole mouth out instantly. So the trick is patience. Wait until it's truly ripe. In many places, that's after frost or when the fruit is very soft. Do that, and the payoff is worth it. Number 5, pawpaw. Pawpaw is the one that surprises people every single time. It's the largest fruit native to North America, and the flavor is unlike most fruits people have grown up with. A lot of people compare it to banana, mango, or custard. And the wild thing is, it doesn't come from some tropical orchard setup. Pawpaw naturally grows in woodland conditions, often in average or mediocre soil, usually in the understory of forests. So when people taste pawpaw for the first time, there's always this disconnect. It tastes tropical, but it belongs here. It's one of the clearest reminders that good fruit and perfect garden conditions are not always the same thing. Number 6, serviceberry. Serviceberry might be one of the most overlooked edible trees in the country. Depending on where you live, you might hear it called Juneberry or Saskatoon. But whatever name you use, it's a beautiful, tough plant that handles rocky ground, sandy soil, and rough margins really well. The fruit tastes a bit like blueberry, with a slightly nutty or almond-like finish. And here's what always gets me. Serviceberries are planted all the time as ornamental trees in parking lots, office parks, and landscaping beds, sometimes in terrible soil, while people walk right past the fruit without realizing it's edible. It's one of those plants that's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. Number 7, chokecherry. Fair warning. Chokecherry is not really a stand in the yard and snack on it raw kind of fruit. Raw, it's very astringent. Pretty unpleasant, honestly. But once it's cooked down into jelly, syrup, or wine, it becomes much more interesting. This is one of those fruits with a long history of practical use, especially in tougher landscapes where not much else was offering much. The trees grow in prairies, dry slopes, and thin soils where a lot of softer fruit plants would struggle. So this one makes a lot more sense as a tough, useful processing fruit than a fresh-eating fruit. Number 8. Aronia chokeberry. Aronia is different from chokecherry, even though the names confuse everybody. These berries are dark, small, and very astringent raw, not especially friendly straight off the bush, but frozen, blended, baked, or turned into jam. They're much easier to appreciate. What makes Aronia interesting in this video is where it can grow. Commercial growers have paid attention to it partly because it can produce on land that isn't great for more demanding crops. That matters, because a plant that can make use of marginal ground is valuable in a way most backyard growers don't think enough about. Number 9. Sand cherry. Sand cherry tells you what it is right in the name. This is a plant built for sandy, exposed, harsh conditions. It comes from plains environments with wind, cold, and soil that doesn't hold water well at all. It stays fairly compact, so it works in smaller spaces, and the fruit is usually better for preserves or baking than for fresh eating. If you've got sandy soil and a climate that beats plants up a little, sand cherry starts making a lot of sense. Number 10. Prickly pear cactus. Now let's talk about the one that barely even seems like it should count. Prickly pear grows in conditions where most people would stop calling it soil and start calling it rock, gravel, decomposed granite, caliche, dry desert ground. This plant is built for it, and yet it produces fruit. Bright, colorful fruit called tunas, with a sweet flavor people often compare to melon or watermelon. The pads are edible too, that's no polish. So if your ground is so dry and poor that most fruit trees would be a complete waste of time, prickly pear is one of the few edible plants that still makes a serious case for itself. Number 11. Gooseberry. Gooseberry feels like an old garden survivor. It has that old-fashioned reputation. Tart fruit, a little thorny, great for pies and preserves. But one of the things that makes gooseberry interesting is how long it can persist. There are stories of gooseberry bushes still fruiting on old homestead sites long after the house, the fence, and the rest of the garden are gone. That tells you something. A plant that can keep producing in rocky, untouched ground decades later is not a plant that needs constant help from you. Number 12. Currant. Currants deserve more attention than they get. Both red and black currants can handle partial shade and less than perfect soil pretty well, which already makes them useful in yards that don't have ideal planting spots. The flavors are stronger than what a lot of people are used to from grocery store fruit. Black currants are deep and musky. Red currants are brighter and sharper. And yes, currants were restricted in parts of the U.S. for years because of disease concerns tied to white pine blister rust. But in many places, those restrictions have changed. So if you want a fruit with real flavor and you don't have perfect conditions, currants are worth looking into. Number 13. Beach plum. Beach plum is one of those fruits that feels tied to a place. It grows along the Atlantic coast in sandy, salty, windy conditions that would make a lot of fruit growers walk away immediately. And that's what makes it so interesting. It doesn't need rich inland garden soil. It wants dunes, grit, and exposure. The fruit is tart raw, but famously good for jam. In the Northeast, beach plum jam has a loyal following for a reason. This is not a plant you force. It thrives in the exact kind of place most people would assume is too rough. Number 14. Buffalo berry. Remember when I said one of these could actually help improve poor soil? This is the one. Buffalo berry is a nitrogen-fixing plant, which means it works with bacteria in its roots that can help add nitrogen to the system over time. So unlike most of the plants on this list, which simply tolerate poor soil, buffalo berry can gradually help improve fertility around it. The berries are tart, and they've been used in different traditional foods on the plains, including a whipped berry dish, sometimes called Indian ice cream. So this is a plant that doesn't just survive rough ground. In the long run, it can help change it. Number 15. Ground cherry. Ground cherry is a little different from most of the plants on this list because it's an annual, not a tree or shrub. but it absolutely belongs here. The fruit comes wrapped in a papery husk, and when you peel it open, you get this little golden fruit that tastes sweet, tangy, and surprisingly tropical. People often compare it to pineapple with a hint of tomato, and the reason it fits this list is simple. Ground cherry is very comfortable in sandy, poor, disturbed soil. In fact, once it likes a spot, it often reseeds itself and keeps coming back. Sometimes not exactly where you expected, but still. Number 16. Jujube. Jujube is one of the toughest fruit trees most people have never planted. It handles drought, heat, alkaline soil, clay, and big weather swings much better than a lot of common fruit trees. Fresh, the fruit is crisp like a small apple. Dried, it gets much closer to the flavor and texture people associate with dates. And jujube has a long history of growing productively in rough, dry soils. That alone should make more people pay attention to it, especially in hot, dry climates where fussier fruit trees struggle. If you want low-maintenance toughness, jujube is hard to ignore. Number 17. Huckleberry. Huckleberry is where this conversation gets really interesting, because this is not just a plant that tolerates poor soil. It often depends on a very specific kind of poor soil, rocky, acidic, low-fertility ground with the right underground fungal relationships. That's why commercial cultivation has been so difficult. Huckleberry doesn't want to be treated like a standard garden crop. It wants the kind of mountain or wild soil ecology it evolved with. And that's the twist. If you take a plant like this and put it into rich, heavily amended garden soil, it may struggle badly. So this is one of the clearest examples of a fruit that doesn't just survive without pampering. It can actually suffer from it. Number 18. Mayhaw. Mayhaw feels like a regional secret. It grows in swamps, bottomlands, and wet acidic soils in parts of the South. Exactly the kind of place people usually don't picture when they think fruit tree. And yet mayhaw has a deep food tradition around it, especially for jelly. The harvest stories alone make it memorable. In some places, people collect mayhaw from flooded areas and swamp edges by boat. That's a very different image from the typical fruit orchard, and that's exactly why it belongs on this list. Number 19. Fig. Figs are one of the best examples of a plant people often overcare for. In the American South especially, you'll find old fig trees thriving in sandy yards, clay-heavy lots, and random corners where nobody did anything special before planting them. And one of the most common mistakes with figs is giving them too much. Too much fertilizer, too much rich compost, too much attention. Because what happens? They put on a lot of leafy growth and not as much fruit. A little restraint goes a long way with figs. They often fruit better when they're not being pushed too hard. Number 20. Muscadine grape. Last one, muscadine. Muscadine is the native grape of the Southeast, and it's built for conditions that are tough on more delicate grape varieties. Sandy soil, acidic soil, humidity, disease pressure. Muscadine handles a lot of that far better than European grapes do. The fruit has thick skin, a strong flavor, and a texture that's completely different from supermarket grapes. And once established, these vines can keep producing for years with far less input than people expect. So if you're in the Southeast and your soil is less than ideal, muscadine is one of the smartest fruits you can grow. So why do these plants handle rough soil better than the fruits most people are used to growing? A lot of it comes down to 4 traits. First, deeper root systems. Some of these plants are able to reach water and minerals far below the zone where shallow-rooted garden crops struggle. So while something like a tomato is suffering in the top few inches of dry soil, a deeper-rooted fruit tree may still be doing just fine. Second, fungal partnerships. Plants like huckleberry and serviceberry often rely on mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. Those fungi basically extend the plant's root reach and help it access nutrients and water it couldn't get on its own. In poor soil, those relationships matter even more. Third, lower nutrient demand. A lot of common fruit crops are heavy feeders. They want fertility, inputs, and regular care. But many of the plants on this list evolved where fertility was limited. They're built to run lean. And in some cases, too much fertility actually pushes them into more leaf growth and less fruit. And fourth, natural selection already did the hard work. Nobody had to engineer beach plum to survive on the coast. Nobody had to teach huckleberry to grow in rocky mountain soil. Over a very long time, the plants that couldn't handle those conditions dropped out. The ones that could are the ones still here. These plants aren't just putting up with bad soil. A lot of them were made for it. A few quick things before you run out and plant all 20. First, don't assume poor soil plants want the soil fixed. In a lot of cases, the biggest mistake is over-improving the ground with too much compost or fertilizer right away. Match the plant to the site first. Second, mulch is still helpful. Even if a plant likes lean soil, mulch can still help by holding moisture, protecting roots, and suppressing weeds. That's different from pumping the soil full of fertility. Third, check your climate and hardiness zone before you buy anything. A plant that thrives in Texas may fail in Minnesota. One that handles Great Plains cold may hate deep south humidity. Always check that part first. Fourth, start small. Don't plant 20 things at once. Pick 2 that actually fit your climate and soil. Watch them for a full season. Learn what they do. Then add more. And finally, if you can, buy from nurseries that specialize in native or regionally adapted plants. Plants raised for your conditions usually handle real-world soil a lot better than plants that were grown soft in perfect greenhouse conditions. So that's 20 fruits that can handle the kind of soil most people assume is useless. Some of them are common, some are weird, some are better for fresh eating, some are better for jam, and some of them are probably growing wild near you already. But the bigger point is this: that patch of ground you gave up on might not actually be the problem. It might just need the right plant. Let me know in the comments which one of these you'd actually try in your yard. And if you're already growing fruit in rough soil, tell me what's working for you. And subscribe if you want more gardening advice for real yards, not perfect ones.